YouTube breadtuber and horror essayist In Praise of Shadows made a widely criticized video that was at times an unresearched hit piece aimed at Wendigoon and other creators on the platform. In this video, IPOS, not to be confused with I'm a piece of shit, hurled baseless accusations at multiple large creators. This created a backlash of content, clearing names and dunking on the video's mastermind.
Like, look at how smug he was in the video compared to how he is now, right? Look at how fucking smug he was. He's a bully. He's genuinely a bully.
He's doing
in a very real way.
I'm proud of him.
He is.
The video gargled horse ass, but I honestly feel a bit bad for the guy. There's something a little ironic about the YouTube cool kids all ganging up on the weirdo while calling him a bully. Maybe I'm a hypocrite because I don't feel pity for Destiny when the world gangs up against him. It just seems like Destiny can handle the criticism, and IPOS probably can't. The most insidious part of the commentary backlash is not the unintended bullying that the creators take part in, but rather that the viewer never sees honest criticism of their favorite creators. Honest critiques are rarely responded to by creators, and even less rarely go viral like the pompous, self-righteous accusations of the IPOS video. Who is this Wendigoon? I hear rumors behind the scenes, but I've never met the man in person, thankfully. But I hear he punches kittens, drinks the blood of orphans. I mean, don't put me on record for this, but I've heard from a reputable source that he might even be a vampire. Here's the cycle. Someone makes a hit piece about your favorite creator. A whole host of creators jump on and obliterate the defamatory video. Over time, you, the viewer, start to view all critiques of this creator as dishonest. Wendigoon stayed out of the drama entirely, like a true gentleman, but don't think for a second that you won't be catching strays, Isaiah. In praise of the shadow of the infamous video, I aim to levy an honest critique of Wendigoon. I'm still in my pompous asshole garb, so you know that I'm smarter than, better than, and get more bitches than anyone I criticize.
That you hate me, put me in the dirt. Baby, I'm a dirtbag. Hit me with your worst jab. I can always take it. Treat me like a dish rack.
I'm a fan of Wendigoon's content. I listen to his videos with earbuds while I do chores. His storytelling is so deeply human, and the darker concepts have always appealed to me. A negative impression that I have of Wendigoon is that he will form a narrative in his head and then seek out data in support of that narrative, even when the greater picture points elsewhere. In the world of SCPs and creepypastas, a conspiratorial mind might be better able to make sense of the nonsensical. However, in the world of history, where Wendigoon often treads, a public prone to conspiracy faces real potential threat. 3 years ago, Wendigoon released the video, I Proved the JFK Conspiracy with a Whiteboard. This video is slightly dated and is by no means his best work, but it's a great demonstration of my critique. His commentary is riddled with imprecision. He relies heavily on personal testimony and narrative appeals, and is clearly influenced, dare I say compromised, by a bias to distrust authority. Here, Gerald Posner, author of Case Closed, Lee Harvey Oswald and the Assassination of JFK, describes the process by which people come to such biased conclusions.
So, if you go into a subject with a predetermined idea of what you want to have the book conclude, then you just look for the evidence and the stories that confirm what you already think.
However, biased or uncritical, I do not believe that Wendigoon is approaching this or any of his videos in bad faith.
Do you think those who are peddling these conspiracy theories genuinely believe them?
I do.
They're not just out there to make a buck.
Well, you know, I think Mark Lane was out to make a buck in the 60s, but I think all the other ones really believe it. It's very tribal, you know. It feels good to be part of a group that can espouse a particular conspiracy theory. You're in on the truth. You're looking for the truth. You know the truth. You got your buddies. It's very tribal, and it's fun, and it's easy, and you don't really have to think that hard.
I'm coming down pretty harsh on the guy. He's making memes, not rewriting history. So why does any of this matter? The cannoli virus of 2019 shined a light to the scientific community on the harm of conspiracy theories.
From the National Center for Biotechnology Information, over the last couple of years, parallel with the COVID-19 pandemic, we've seen a COVID-19 infodemic rife with conspiracy theories. Conspiracy theories can be defined as attempts to explain the ultimate causes of significant social and political events and circumstances with claims of secret plots by two or more powerful actors. Research investigating why people might hold conspiracy beliefs has developed steadily over the last 15 years, with findings suggesting that conspiracy beliefs are adopted when important psychological needs are not being met, such as experiences of anxiety, uncertainty, and threat. Rip and Rohr, in a systematic review performed in February 2021, found 12 studies examining COVID-19 conspiracy beliefs and preventative behavior, and 10 measuring COVID-19 vaccination willingness. Results consistently uncovered a negative relationship between COVID-19 related conspiracy beliefs, vaccine willingness, and infection prevention behaviors. However consistent with correlational findings, a longitudinal study by, I'm not even going to try this, provided some casual evidence that COVID-19 conspiracy beliefs reduced adherence to social distancing guidelines over a 1-month period.
With the stakes and sin established, it's time to disprove Wendigoon with a whiteboard. I hope you haven't been sniffing markers because it's about to get crazy. Like many conspiracy theorists, Wendigoon falls prey to a mishandling of Occam's razor. The truthist is shown a growing miasma of abnormalities around a given event. At a certain point, the individual then radicalizes around grand narratives that explain away such oddities.
This is so absurd that the official name given to it during the court trials that would follow is the magic bullet theory.
The assassination of JFK was one of the most spectacular events in all of human history. Of course, the circumstances around it will seem out of the ordinary, right down to the shooter himself.
The Oswald's politics, he had this left-wing mix of politics with a little bit of anarchy in them, but you're absolutely right. The key thing for me is that he had decided by the early spring of 1963, only months before Kennedy is killed, that he is going to change history by committing himself to political assassination.
In his video, Wendigoon argues that the forensic and ballistic analysis is unlikely, and therefore, the greatest conspiracy in the history of America was covered up for 60 years without anything leaking that would blow its cover.
After the film JFK, millions of documents come out, and there's been nothing in those documents.
Maybe there were disgruntled people in the CIA, or there were people in Castro's government that said, hey, the CIA is trying to kill Castro, let's kill Kennedy first. So those plots could be there. People assume that if there are people that want the president dead and are plotting to do it, and then somebody pulls off the assassination, they must be working for them. But no, you need to establish that.
Like with most of the major conspiracy theories, I fail to suspend my disbelief that humans would stay quiet about such juicy topics. Two can only keep a secret if one of them is dead, but apparently hundreds can keep secrets if they work for the government.
So the National Archives recently released a lot of Kennedy files that have been classified for decades. Anything in there that has supported your case or contradicted your case?
There's nothing that's contradicted the conclusion that Oswald alone killed Kennedy. And I think that that's been to the frustration of a lot of conspiracy theorists over the years. But I published in '93. There's still hundreds of thousands of documents yet to be released. And I had some journalists say to me, you put your neck out on the line because you've done it before all these other documents came out. I never really understood that, because what I was doing in 1993 was saying, here's my view as a researcher, historian on what happened on November 22nd, 1963. All of the evidence says Lee Harvey Oswald alone killed Kennedy. If documents came out that proved there was a conspiracy in the assassination of the president, I have no doubt that Lee Harvey Oswald was the shooter. If they proved that he was doing it for some organization, if those files are there, I'll be the first one sitting down with everybody else looking at them. But I don't think that they exist. And the reason for that is we forget that in files that are still sealed today, there are 3,500 still remaining, supposed to come out in June of 2023. We'll see if that happens. They keep going down the road. They were reviewed, all of them, by the Assassination Review Board, a group set up in the 90s to determine which files should be released to the public. They saw all the documents that are currently in the National Archives and then sent them over to the National Archives for safekeeping. Hard for me to imagine that that board of great experts saw something that would change the course of history on what we know on the assassination. They've been able for 20 years not to leak that to the New York Times or the Washington Post.
Despite the improbability of an effective cover-up, Wendigoon still positively asserts that Lee Harvey Oswald was not the sole shooter.
I'll go ahead and say this to be generous. I do believe Lee Harvey Oswald was one of the shooters. However, there is not a doubt in my mind that he was not the only shooter.
This particular claim seems to be the most popular among JFK conspiracy theorists, and for good reason. In its initial investigation, the Warren Commission speculated that there were 1.5 seconds in between when JFK and then Governor John Connally were shot.
They had one hell of a problem because it was determined that Connally was hit 1.5 seconds after Kennedy had been struck.
We now know that they were both hit by the same bullet. However, this false idea still floats about to this day, adding to the public's confusion surrounding the magic bullet, C399.
The space between the two shots was long enough that they could tell a difference in when each of them was hit, but not fast enough for someone to rechamber around and get a second shot off. Unless there was a second shooter.
The Warren Commission was established to handle the case of the JFK assassination, and likely in a step to quell unrest, made imperfect decisions on imperfect information in order to find an end to this traumatic event sooner rather than later.
It's not surprising the Warren Commission got some things wrong because there were things they couldn't necessarily prove. They had to guess at the second bullet. They couldn't figure out the timing of the shots unless one bullet hit both Kennedy and Connally, and so it was actually, Specter was then on the commission. Alan Specter later became a senator who came up with the idea that it was one bullet, but they weren't really sure of the proof of that. It took almost 30 years before a group that does forensics work for trials was able to show how that happened and how the bullets slowed up.
It seems that although the Warren Commission had imperfect information, they settled on the correct conclusion, based on the logical razor, that given no second shooter, one bullet had to cause all of those wounds.
So they took two people, cadavers the size of Kennedy and Connally, and they put them in the equivalent of the car at the same space and location, and the shots fired with 6.5 millimeter, the Carcano bullets. And all day long now, they're able to recreate that shot and the damage on that bullet. I reprint in the book a copy of one of those bullets that was done. That work, which was new and was really not covered at all by the press, covered in case closed, to me, settles the question of the single bullet. No matter what else you want to say, although it didn't settle for a lot of people, still hold on to it. They can't give it up. One shooter firing from behind the president that day fired one shot that inflicted those sets of wounds on those two men, and is the bullet that is now called CE-399.
If the Warren Commission had conducted a more thorough investigation, there wouldn't be this impression of Oswald's shots being particularly hard to make.
The Warren Commission also got the sequence wrong. They thought the first bullet hit Kennedy, the second bullet missed, and the third bullet was a headshot. That gave the shooter about 5.5 seconds. Not impossible. The FBI had people recreate those shots, but it was a tight sequence. And as a result, people said, nobody could make that. Oswald couldn't make it. Turns out that it was the first bullet that missed. We now know that almost certainly most people have come to agree with that. Gives the shooter 8.5 to 11.5 seconds.
The infamous film shot by Abraham Zapruder represents a significant chunk of evidence for the case. A simple mistake of 3 to 5 seconds makes the difference between a near impossible shot and a relatively easy shot that Oswald still almost missed.
At the point where the second shot is, it's no guesswork involved anymore because we know it's around frames 223 and 224 of the Zapruder film, because you can see the moment at which the governor is responding half a second later to the shot. And when I say the frame of the film, for those who don't know it, the home movie of the assassination, which is the Zapruder film, is also the time clock for the assassination. It's 18.3 frames a second. So when I say frame 223 to 224, we're talking an 18th of a second, and as you can measure it very, very distinctly. If we didn't have the film, you'd never have anything solved in this case.
Oswald wasn't a marksman, but he didn't need to be. He was a guy with a gun in the right place at the right time. The Zapruder film is such a pivotal piece of evidence because it shows the series of events without bias. Wendigoon relies heavily on witness testimony and compelling narratives to convince you of his perspective. Witness testimony, however, is innately flawed. During stressful and extreme moments, our perception is clouded with adrenaline and other brain juices. Governor Connally believed that he and the president were not hit by the same bullet.
This is a direct quote from former Governor John Connally. There is my absolute knowledge, and Nellie's too, that one bullet caused the president's first wound and that an entirely separate shot struck me.
We know this to be false, so we can disregard his testimony regardless of his level of conviction or societal status. Wendigoon also cites the testimony of car salesman James Teague, who was also struck that day, as contradiction to Oswald being the sole shooter.
The reason he stopped and turned to face the motorcade was because he heard a gunshot. Now, if he heard a gunshot, took time to stop and turn, there is no way the first shot was the same one that hit him. But it would make sense if it was the second or the third or more after that.
Yes, it would make sense if it were the second shot. Wendigoon is correct that Teague's testimony contradicts the idea that Oswald missed his first shot. However, as stated earlier, that was the critical mistake of the Warren Commission, and in fact, Oswald missed his second shot, the second shot that grazed Teague, which lines up perfectly with his testimony. The failings of human perception are not limited to adrenaline-fueled shootouts. For centuries, magicians and illusionists have taken advantage of the human inability to see things as they truly are. Since the public first laid eyes on the Zapruder film, there has existed the perception that Kennedy was shot from the front because his head moves backwards.
In fact, the most direct and straightforward explanation for the rearward motion of Kennedy's head is that it was simply struck by a projectile from the front right side that remained inside his head, causing it to recoil backwards.
The physics exclude anything except that the bullets came from behind, but no matter how thorough and nerdy the analysis, the truther will continue to appeal to narrative and ignore anything that combats the conspiracy. Conspiracies thrive on narratives and appeals to absurdity. When enough people repeat the same idea with enough conviction and enough charisma through a professional setting with a receptive, uncritical audience, they start to give the impression of legitimacy. Here's Dr. Cyril Wecht spinning a beautiful story about the Carcano rifle, which has absolutely no relevance to the case, but is supposed to convince you that Oswald could not have killed Kennedy.
I talked about this as I'm talking about now, and when I mentioned the Manicure Carcano, I saw some of the professors who were older than me, and I respected them greatly, sitting in the back, and they were snickering and smiling at each other. I felt so bad. I wanted to crawl under the table, and I went to Silvio Merli, who was now the new director. He spoke English, and we were good friends. I said, Silvio, I want to apologize if I said anything silly or wrong or mispronounced a name or so on. He said, no, you don't understand. They're not laughing at you. They're laughing when you mention the Manicure Carcano. In Italy, the Manicure Carcano, where it was developed, is considered to be an instrument of love, not a weapon of war.
His narrative is powerful, but goes in direct contrast of the evidence.
My point is that we know that ballistically, they've done neutron activation tests on the bullets, and there was a House Select Committee in the late 70s to test the bullets. We know that the bullet fragments found in the car, which were from the headshot, and the single bullet that wounded both men, they came from one gun at the exclusion of everything else. They came from Oswald's rifle. No matter who killed Kennedy that day, they used that rifle. If you want to say it was a world-class assassin, they still had to use that junky rifle.
Since narratives and testimonies are so biased, let's turn our attention back to the cold, hard evidence.
The original reason that this House Select Committee came together is because new technology was found in '76 that analyzed this data more closely. Using audiograph equipment, and this is my interpretation of that, they managed to pull the audio from the original Zapruder film and picked out that there were 6 shots fired in this amount of time of the film, not the original thought out 3.
Wendigoon says that the House Select Committee on Wendigoon says that the House Select Committee on Assassinations, but will give him the benefit of doubt and assume he meant this Fuck me, this is so hard. Wendigoon says that the House Select Committee of Assassinations analyzed the audio from the Zapruder film, but will give him the benefit of doubt and assume that he meant the dictabelt recording. I'd like to assume that Wendigoon knows that we can't take the audio from a silent film.
We got him.
And what of the House Select Committee with this acoustical evidence saying that there was not 3 shots, but in fact 4 shots fired? We have this dictabelt recording.
I think that's one of the reasons when I was in law school. So I'm graduating from law school the year that they came to the conclusion that there was a 95% certainty of a conspiracy in the Kennedy assassination. Boy, that seemed pretty conclusive to me. I felt my idea about the mob had to be right, because this is a 3-year government investigation that came to that conclusion. That was the headline and seemed very, very persuasive. I remember hearing, didn't know the details, that they had found a police dicta belt that was from a motorcycle, that was a motorcycle that had its mic stuck in the on position and had inadvertently recorded the sounds of the assassination, therefore the gunshots, and the dicta belt that was recording all of the police communications therefore had been examined by experts for the Select Committee and picked up evidence of 4 shots. Case closed. 4 shots, conspiracy. Only later, when I listened to the dicta belt, and this is years later, it was actually put out in a magazine on a little 45 for the first time, and you listen to the dicta belt and you wait for the shots. Now you get to the spot where the shots are, and here's what you hear. Nothing. I expect to hear actual gunfire. You don't hear that because there's no gunfire over the period in which the Select Committee says shots took place. What the sound experts said, who were hired by the Select Committee at the very end of their work when they were running out of money, and they had done some great work. The Select Committee did some fantastic work on debunking many of the false stories and claims. Then this comes up at the very end. They said, oh, well, we don't hear any shots, but we see these sort of impulses, these sonic impulses that are taking place on the dicta belt. That is the equivalent of the shot. And there are 4 of them just around the time the Kennedy's killed. That's the proof that he's killed. Great idea. National Academy of Sciences takes it, examines it, and says, no, not quite. We think you're at the wrong spot. You're a minute and a half too early. And then other experts come in over time. The person whose mic was in the open position, we now have pretty good evidence, wasn't even at Dealey Plaza.
The evidence that Oswald killed Kennedy is overwhelming. Over the years, individuals have made mistakes while looking at the evidence. Unfortunately, the conspiracy theorist gives unreasonable weight to any notion supporting what they want to believe. If the mistake tells you what you want to hear, you will happily ignore the correction.
And although it's now been fairly debunked, there are still people that hold on to the acoustics material. And I know that it takes time and detail to go through it.
Combing through evidence is tedious, and Wendigoon would rather believe uncritically that his favorite boogeyman is controlling things behind the scenes.
And that's the best part. The day after they used that other film footage to determine that there was a second shooter, it all disappeared overnight from a CIA lockup, to which they said that someone probably stole it, along with all the other evidence that proved that something was wrong with this picture.
Throughout the video, Wendigoon lazily accepts whatever supports his narrative. Nothing is more exemplary of this than the CIA bad narrative. I'm just going to rapid fire through these because they're easily debunked with a quick Google search.
In 1976, a group was formed called the House Select Committee on Assassinations. Now you may be asking, why in 1976, 13 years after the president's death, did they form a committee just to talk about this event? And it's because it came out that the CIA was purposefully hiding information regarding the assassination.
The HSCA claims that the CIA withheld from the Warren Commission a U.S. plot to kill Fidel Castro. This does not change in any way that Oswald shot Kennedy.
A lot of people also point to Jack Ruby, the man who ran up and shot Lee Harvey Oswald, as being for the mob because his family debts were paid off. But you know who else would probably pay off family debts? I'll give you a hint, it starts with CIA.
There is no evidence to suggest that Ruby had anything to do with the CIA. Wendigoon just wants to believe that the CIA had their hands in every aspect of this assassination.
Also, in 1966, they tried to reevaluate JFK's autopsy, and his brain was missing. Like, after the initial autopsy, they took the brain out and preserved it, and no one's been able to find it since. So, I make it that what you will. I have no idea of why they would do that.
JFK's brain was found 2 years before Wendigoon's video.
Also, the initial Warren Commission, which was the first one that happened immediately after this, that determined that Lee Harvey Oswald was the only shooter and he acted alone, was made almost entirely up of CIA members.
Literally, only one member of the commission was a CIA member.
I don't see why a mob murder would be covered up to the degree that this was obviously and proven to be covered up by the CIA.
You're obviously and proven to be biased to believe something was covered up by the CIA. Wendigoon's biases blind him to the sensible conclusions of the other side.
There's absolutely no way that you could convince me or anyone else who thinks about it sensibly that Lee Harvey Oswald was just a crazy dude who acted alone. In my opinion, they're absolutely guilty, and even not of this, some other stuff.
I know Wendigoon is better than this. I hope he can either come out with counter evidence and prove me wrong, or start to hone back his CIA or terrorists radar.
So I used to think, it's a shame there's no CCTV footage inside the depository and there was footage of Oswald at the window with his gun. Today, if I provided that to conspiracy theorists, even at the time, they would have said, that's only a picture of Oswald with his gun at the window. Maybe that was set up a week before just to have him take some pictures and he was told to do that. How do we know that was November 22nd? So now let's say it was a wide angle and I was able to see the motorcade going by. They would say, well, how do we know that he fired the gun and he wasn't just as a backup? Okay, so now we have sound of the tape. We hear the sounds of the shots. There are 3 shots. They would say, how do we know that what Oswald was shooting weren't blanks and that the real shooter was in the front? Maybe Oswald was led to believe that he would be the assassin. He was put there that day, but the government made sure that they would kill Kennedy by putting the real assassin on the grassy knoll. Oswald fired the shots thinking they were real and they were blanks. The real assassin killed him from the front. I realized that even if I had the sound tape and the video, there would be people that say, I don't think that that was him killing the president. So you ask me what's missing? What's missing is common sense. What's missing is logic. What's missing is the ability to accept that history can be changed by one person with one gun and one bullet. We should know that. We saw World War I start with the assassination of the Archduke. We saw Lincoln assassinated. We know that history can be changed that way.
One silly, unsourced YouTube video is just a drop in the bucket of misinformation. One misinformed video can't influence much, right? But then remember how we got here in the first place. This video has been viewed 2.5 million times. One measly video can generate a shitstorm of debate, and one measly bullet can kill the president.
You know, at the end of the day, I always just wondered whether or not the imbalance of somebody who was as historic and, you know, at the time, certainly Camelot and you know, new generation taking over politics in the United States, and it was the 1960s, whether a person of that greatness could be taken out by just such an insignificant schlub as Lee Harvey Oswald. And the imbalance of that means people just can't buy it.
Absolutely. So, you know, how could you accept that somebody like that could do it? You want to put more meaning into the assassination. We have to find meaning. How could such a great man die?
Maybe I have too much faith in humanity, but I don't think people watch Wendigoon because he's the greatest historian or detective of all time. I personally love his work because he is a fantastic storyteller. He seeks out the stories on the edge of fact and fiction and does his best to distinguish to the audience which is which. In a 30-minute video, he made me angry at the US government and made me rethink my relationship with cheese. Basically, my argument is Isaiah has personal biases and makes occasional mistakes. What a steaming hot take I chose to start off this channel. I can't imagine the man would disagree that this video is lazy compared to his other works. Honestly, I'm hopeful that it'll do a full piece on the event in the future. We need conspiracy theorists to point out the times when the establishment gets things wrong. At his best, Isaiah strings together the absurd, seemingly unrelated details of a story in a poetic and profoundly meaningful way. Here's Wendigoon on the tragic success of the Franklin expedition.
One of the things I love about this story so much is, despite the fact that it was over a century and a half ago, the mystery is still continuing to be unsolved and unraveled each day. Another tragic beauty of the story is that in 1850, one of the ships sent to search for the Franklin expedition, known as the HMS Investigator, and yes, that was the name of it, seemed to be right on the path of the expedition, only they took the other route, meaning that they found the path from Europe to Asia. To which the Investigator also got trapped in the ice and needed rescued from the Resolute, which, as I mentioned earlier, also got trapped in the ice. But that's not important. They found the path. And that path, which was later discovered as the Simpson Strait, is the one I mentioned earlier that perhaps the final members of the crew realized they had discovered. The captain who discovered that the Simpson Strait was indeed the passage from Europe to Asia agreed with the Admiralty that the Franklin expedition should be named as the discoverers of it. And in 1860, the British government honored Captain Franklin as being the discoverer of the passage between worlds, and Lady Franklin was there to accept the medal in his honor. To which they commemorated a statue of John Franklin, to which the plaque simply reads, "They forged the last link with their lives."
Wendigoon is not in the business of criticizing others. He's a wholesome storyteller who isn't trying to paint himself as the most serious guy.
I can't 100% verify that this account is accurate or from someone that was there. However, I choose to believe it because it's funny.
My issue isn't with Wendigoon, but instead with the creators who do criticize others, who generally make videos about the juiciest, most hated, lowest hanging fruit. Pumping out these videos may be easy money, but it makes the online discourse more toxic, whether you intend to or not. I encourage creators to publicly call out their friends. Make a video calling out a drop in quality or lazy editing. Surely it takes more balls to publicly criticize someone you'd like to work with than it would to criticize the lolcow of the week. Although IPOS lost the plot somewhere along the way, at the heart of his messaging is a desire for the elevation of an art form that he and Wendigoon both love.
Christian Sagamsky is a fascinating artist to me for a number of reasons. The first of which is her very clear hold on her gothic personal style. Also the fact that next to no information exists on her online outside of just a handful of interviews that have been conducted over the past 20 years. As well as the idea that all of her projects are done entirely alone in her home. Thousands upon thousands of individually posed and crafted 16mm photographs, dozens of puppets, as well as handcrafted outfits for those puppets. Sets, paintings, effects, all done in her garage by herself. Untold hours dedicated to moving stuffed cloth and clay a couple centimeters at a time, just in order to tell this one story. The process would end up taking her 13 years to complete.
Some creators positively asserted that IPOS suffered from mental illness.
This is early onset schizophrenic levels of thinking, and I genuinely think this guy should seek mental evaluation. I'm not joking.
To be clear, this is like a deep form of mental illness.
I think he genuinely is like mentally ill or something.
I really hope he gets his mental health in order as he aims to return to YouTube. You know, the whole, I wish him well despite him calling me transphobic and calling other people rapists and insinuating that Wendigoon isn't Native American enough. 80% of the people that live in his area are like racist. This guy's just a weirdo.
If IPOS has a mental illness like you suggest that he get help, then leave the dude alone. Don't make a third video monetizing his downfall. But don't confuse me wanting better online discourse with me suggesting that creators shouldn't respond to accusations. Each person IPOS slandered in his video absolutely should respond. If we give creators honest feedback, they're more likely to change. Furthermore, the creator and their audience will become more tolerant of future criticism.
And if you think this entire video is crazy, if you think this is some whack brain conspiracy that doesn't make any sense and I'm insane and very weird, which you're definitely right about at least one of those things, I still want to say thank you for watching.